Hello. Hey, folks. I just wanted to give everyone the heads up. We are going to start in about 5 minutes, as well as if anybody has lost a bike valet, please go to registration after we have it for you. All right, thank you. See you in 5. Good to go? All right. Hello, folks. We are going to get started. All right. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Cameron Armstrong. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the regional organizer for Climate Reality Project Canada, as well as an organizer for the Consider Climate Manitoba campaign. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you all so much for taking the time here to join us tonight to discuss climate action as well as climate policy in Manitoba. It's really exciting to see so many Manitobans here who are also excited about climate action. Tonight, you'll hear from representatives from Manitoba's Liberal, PC, Green, NDP parties about their climate commitments. All the parties who had candidates running in over 50% of Manitoba's ridings in the last provincial election were invited to attend, and we're so thankful for all the parties represented here today. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we're currently on. We recognize that we are currently on Treaty 1 territory, the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. As we're speaking from a provincial context today, and we are joined by folks online virtually from across the province, I'd also like to acknowledge that along with Treaty 1, Manitoba is located on Treaty 2, 3, 4, 5, and the adhesion to Treaty 5. I encourage you all to start thinking about your personal relationships with the land. Where did your family come from? How did you end up here? What privileges or circumstances allowed you to be here today? What have you benefited from, lost, or gained? As we discuss moving forward to combat climate change and environmental degradation, it's critical for us to acknowledge and honor the stewardship and care for the lands and waters that has been led by Indigenous peoples on Turtle Island from time immemorial. Real climate action and environmental solutions can only occur through Indigenous partnership and collaboration, and with the recognition of Indigenous environmental leaders and their knowledge. As we are all sharing space tonight, I'd like to go over a quick few housekeeping rules. So, first, please try to minimize distractions as much as you can. Please take the time right now to silence your phones and any other mobile devices you may have with you. Applause only, please, tonight. When reacting to candidate statements, please refrain from anything other than applause. In other words, please no booing or heckling. We are also hoping to foster a safer space tonight where everyone is welcomed. There will be zero tolerance for those who promote violence against others on the basis of race, ethnicity, national origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, religious affiliation, or disability. Please no partisan statements. As this forum is showcasing many parties' platforms, please refrain from responding or making partisan statements in respect to all parties in attendance. And lastly, take space, but also make space. Share your perspective, but make space for other voices to be heard as well. Recognize that we are all here to learn tonight. Does that sound okay with everyone? Awesome. All right. Well, with that, I'm so incredibly honored to invite Grandma Shingoose up to bless our event tonight.
We're just lighting up a smudge and got it? Yeah. Oh yeah. There. Good. Okay. Yeah, just put them there. Okay, thank you. Good evening. My name is Geraldine Shingoose, and my spirit names are Sky Woman and Northern Lights Woman. I come from the Bear Clan, and my warrior spirit is Grandmother Turtle. So I let a smudge because in our traditions, our way, we whenever we say have a talk with the Creator and our ancestors, that smoke goes up to them. The golden eagle is the one that takes it up. So I have so much to share tonight. I was driving here and I was thinking about what I wanted to share. And before I say the prayer, I want to share a story. I grew up in the bush. We lived on the land. I lived with my mom and my dad and my kokum. We didn't have any running water or electricity or all those. We didn't have Wi-Fi. So we didn't have a cell phone. We didn't know what they were back then. So it was, my parents worked hard and we worked hard too as children, you know, just hauling that water and just living on the land. And I remember my dad and my brother, like, you know, they would dig a hole like 6 feet under, or maybe even deeper, just so that they could, that's where we could keep our food that we wanted to keep cold. That was our refrigerator. And it was, but it was a joyous time. Like, you know, at night times we'd look at the stars and the moon and the sky and the northern lights and just be out there on the land. So today I attended a residential school conference at a national gathering for residential school survivors at the RBC. I'm a 9-year residential school survivor. So I was thinking about coming here tonight and how us survivors were taken and we were disconnected from our lands. Like, you know, all those teachings and, like, you know, as Indigenous people, we have a giving and receiving relationship with the land. Whatever we take, we give. So, and we only take what we need. And that's the way it's always been, like, you know, with our ancestors and with our people now. What I do now with the land is I pick the medicines, I pick the sage, and I grow tobacco, and I grow my garden, and I pick sweetgrass. And that's all you need, and you need water. Like, you know, it just simple things like that. Nokomis is hurting. Mother Earth is hurting. You could see it. You could see her, what's happening worldwide. You know, the fires, the floods. People are being disconnected from their lands. We can no longer exploit Mother Earth, because if you continue to exploit Mother Earth and her resources, because you're not giving back to her. What are you doing? Like, you know, it just breaks my heart to see that. Like, you know, as a Anishinaabe Kwe, as an Indigenous woman. Because as Indigenous women, we have that connection to the land. When she hurts, we hurt. And you could see that with the MMIW. All our Indigenous women are being taken or murdered or missing. And when that's stopped, then Mother Earth will replenish. So we need to replenish her. We need to give her messages, daily messages. Whenever I pray to her, I always say thank you, my gratitude. That's all I have to say. I don't ask her for anything. So I just want to open this event, and I'm hoping that the leaders in this room think ahead, not just the 4 years or 8 years, wherever you're going to be in that role, but I think you need to think ahead for your future children, your great-grandchildren. Like, do you want Mother Earth still here for them? I do. So with that, I just want to offer a prayer, and I'm her voice, because she doesn't have a voice. So as a grandmother, as a chaplain, as a great-grandma, I have to speak for her. Bonjour, Kichimento, Kijikashkoya Danishnakas, Weweta Kwe Makwanodam. I come in prayer tonight, Creator, grandfathers, grandmothers, Nukamas, and to my spirit helpers. I feel emotional right now because I feel her pain. I pray that people understand her, understand Nokomis and Mother Earth, and understand where she's coming from and what she wants. And I pray that she's given the messages that she's been asking for all along. I pray that our animals, the birds, the ones in the waters, I pray that they're protected by her because they're the ones that are also taking care of her. So I say Chimigwech to them. I say Chimigwech to our leaders here that are going to be presenting tonight, and the responsibility and the role that you're going to have is a big one. And so I pray that you're given that guidance and support that you need so that you could lead with heart and with spirit. I pray for the people that are here, the ones that are constantly and on the front lines, fighting for our lands, protecting the lands and the waters. I see you, and I know that you're out there, so I say Chimigwech to use. I say Chimigwech for these medicines that are here, and I ask that the young ones that are coming forward, that you're fierce and that you bring action to continue to protect the land, because we need you, and you're going to be doing that for the future, our great-grandchildren. So with that, I just want to close, and I want to say Chimigwech for inviting me here to speak, and it's always an honor, like, to stand with the allies, and, you guys, I see you, so it's Chimigwech. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really beautiful and incredibly moving. It feels very special for you to join us today, so thank you so much. Next, I would like to introduce everyone to our moderator tonight, Richard Cloutier. Richard is the co-host of the news on 680 CJOB and a senior reporter for Global News. He has an incredible passion for storytelling, and I'm so excited for him to be joining us tonight. Thank you for being here, Richard, and with that, I'll pass it off to you.
Thank you so very much. Good evening, friends. How's everybody? Good. It's wonderful to see you, Grandma Shingus. Thank you so very much. And Cameron, thank you so very much for those very kind words. I'm going to ask you to applaud after I introduce all four here, because you know, come election time, and I've been moderating a few of these over the years, it's so very important that people step forward and be heard. I remember the very first environment forum I did 30 years ago. And environment at the time was kind of one of those things where the politicians had to do it, but they didn't want to necessarily do it. And I know some of the veterans in this room, and I recognize some of you from way back when I was a teenager. But the courage of your conviction, and I remember having the conversations, you know, 30 years ago, and being in a room like this where people would say, well, climate change, We've come a long ways in educating people outside this room. And each one of you are here because you care, and you're ambassadors into, I dare say, the most important issues facing us as humans is whether or not we can get our stuff together. And it has to happen locally, provincially, nationally, and internationally. So I thank the four of you for being here, for trying to answer the questions, because it's tough. And I think hopefully in the next 90 minutes, we'll see that there are, some differences here. But I will not doubt, knowing all four here, some better than others, that they are all committed to do what's best for Manitobans. Sometimes others can do it better, but sometimes the whole conviction that each one has and the parties have is something that at times can be questioned. But I also think that most people I have dealt with when it comes to this issue are quite sincere about it. So I thank you, four of you, ahead of time. Dougald Lamont is here from the Liberals, Lisa Naylor from the NDP, Kevin Klein from the Progressive Conservatives, and Janine Gibson from the Green Party. We're not having introductory remarks, but you can certainly, as part of your answer to question number one, kind of use that as an opportunity to say good evening to everybody, because that's kind of what we do, right? So with that, we'll have 2 minutes. I will play Interrupt Duck at some point, where I'll say time. And then if I have to really interrupt you, you'll know. And the way we'll do this, we'll start at the end and then we'll kind of rotate. If there's an opportunity for some engagement, I like that too. I absolutely like that too, as long as we can agree to be respectful. And I think this audience knows the rules. So question number one, and we'll begin with you, candidate Naylor from the NDP. Across the globe and in this region, we are now experiencing the impacts of Earth's average temperature rising by almost 1.5 degrees Celsius since pre-industrial time. A rise in extreme weather events, environmental emergencies, such as what we have seen here, forest fires, droughts, floods, heat waves, result in increased adverse health outcomes and higher levels of infectious disease. What immediate actions will your government develop and implement to ensure climate mitigation and adaptation will be the priorities in all government policies if you're elected in October? Take 2 minutes.
Thank you, Richard.
There's a microphone there, right?
Of course, I had to be first.
Should be on.
Is it on? Okay, thank you. I am just going to take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Lisa Naylor. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the MLA for Wolseley, and I served almost 4 years as the critic for environment and climate for the NDP. I also want to take a moment to say that, to send regrets on behalf of Wab Kinew. I know it was very important to him to participate in this forum, but elections have a lot of moving parts, and something made it impossible for him to be here tonight. So I'm very pleased and proud to be here to represent Wab and Manitoba NDP. And I want folks to know that climate issues and environment issues are so top of mind for us, such a critical part of our party's thinking and policies, that actually many of us in the party could speak with expertise on the policies that we are bringing forward. And I'm glad that Wab can count on us in that way, and I'm proud to represent him tonight. Climate change is the greatest challenge of our time. We see the consequences around us from floods and wildfires and droughts, and we have a responsibility to act to make life better for future generations, to protect our natural spaces, our wildlife, and our water. We will start with taking the climate crisis seriously, working with other levels of government instead of fighting them in court like the PCs have done. We will work towards the federal government's net zero target for 2050 with incremental goals and accountability. The creation of a renewable energy grid has been the single most important advancement in the fight against climate change in this province's history. But to her discredit, Heather Stephenson has fought against it every step of the way. We have a renewable energy grid despite the PCs. The PC government not only spent millions of dollars in court fighting the federal carbon tax, but Heather Stephenson has promised to do it again. They took federal dollars designated for carbon reduction programs and funded existing programs while cutting clean energy programs like Manitoba's solar rebate program. In addition to using our clean energy advantage at Manitoba Hydro to help grow our electric vehicle and EV infrastructure, an NDP government will use nature-based approaches to mitigate climate change. We've committed to protecting 30% of Manitoba by 2030, and this includes protecting wetlands, which play a vital role in preventing wildfires and flooding. In 2015, the NDP introduced a provincial act to regulate peatlands and banned peat harvesting in provincial parks. Peat is another critical element in mitigating climate change. We will also end the PC's deforestation, plant more trees, protect and invest in provincial parks, and grow our urban green spaces.
Thank you so very much. Let's go on now to Dougald Lamont.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm Dougald Lamont. I'm leader of the Manitoba Liberal Party, MLA for St. Boniface. In 2019, we put forward, I think it was a 26 or 28-page plan, especially for green growth and renewal. And I want to thank Grandma Shingoose for her opening prayer, and also the concept, the very important concept that we need to give back. I happened to meet with a few years ago Robert Falcon-Ouellette, who's running for us in Southdale this year. And I traveled to Brandon. We met with Frank Tacan Sr., I believe, who's an elder in Brandon. And he sat us down and he talked about this. And he said, look, you cannot keep taking without giving back. So that was a major focus for what we wanted to do. And we've expanded on our 2019 platform in a couple of ways. One is that we would run government on the campsite rule. The whole idea is you're supposed to leave it better than you found it. The other is that when it comes to giving back, I mean, one of the challenges that people have faced is that the carbon tax is really, it's all stick and no carrot, and we need some carrots to make this work. So we would create a $300 million fund. We would go to the federal government, we would take back and renegotiate, we would take back control over the carbon levy in Manitoba so we could run our own programs, so we could make our own changes, so we would get that revenue instead of it just coming back straight through checks as it is right now. We would create a $300 million green fund to be administered by Efficiency Manitoba. We would change Efficiency Manitoba's mandate to include climate change. The funding would come from the carbon levy as well as through Manitoba Hydro, and that would be used to fund projects across Manitoba, across a wide range of areas. So if you're a municipality, it could help pay for wetlands. If you want to create a wilderness corridor and rewilding, it will help pay for that. Basically, my joke is, I'm sort of the PCs, they're not always the greatest capitalists. They sometimes forget that you need capital to make things happen. And that's what we need. What has been missing to take us to the next level is funding, is making it easier for everybody. So the idea behind this fund is to give everybody the opportunity to participate, and it's $300 million a year, every year going up. So I mean, over the course of a four-year of a 4-year
Time.
mandate, that would be $1.2 billion. Thank you.
Mr. Lamont, thank you so very much. Janine Gibson with the Greens. Hi.
Thank you very much. Is this on? It is, okay. Merci pour votre invitation. I would like to say that the Manitoba Green Action Team Road to Resistance Plan is based on the similar principles we have with the Green Party, principles of health, ecology, fairness, and care that I have lived the previous 30 years of my life supporting in helping ecosystems adapt and change from industrial agriculture, supporting the organic and resilient agriculture sector. So in terms of the climate crisis, I have to say that what many of the sponsoring organizations here this evening have been working on are an excellent place to start and need more respect. The Road to Resilience Plan sets the clear climate goals and targets that we need in order to get to the 31% of the 2005 levels. And so we support that. We also believe we need to incorporate climate considerations into legislation, all legislation, that we need to ensure that we reduce energy costs in homes and public buildings. And these points that I'm listing are things that a Green MLA or that several Green MLAs will play a conscious role in our legislature to ensure that we are actually addressing these critical steps to addressing our climate emergency that's happening right now. We need to mainstream climate in policy development, integrate the climate assessments in the development of all policies, ensuring all development, Mr. Klein, that we appeal licenses that threaten our water in whatever way, and that we respect the fact that water is life and that we need to understand what impacts using resources have on our communities. The communities not only of people on the land, we are part of the biology, but all of the life, so that we make it easier for people to consult with one another, work with one another through funding green jobs to accurately assess, are we meeting our climate goals? What are the climate impact assessments that are working? Where are we still vulnerable? Where can we be more resilient? We need cross-determination, cross-departmental, climate budgeting funding, many aspects we need to work as a conscience on. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. With us, our fourth candidate here from the Progressive Conservatives. Please welcome Kevin Klein.
Thank you very much, Richard. And before we start, feel free to call me Kevin anytime. And I think we should take a moment, and I'm sure my colleagues would like to as well, to send our sympathies to all those that were impacted and are being impacted by the devastating wildfires. We also have to extend our heartfelt appreciation to the courageous first responders who have exhibited unwavering commitment. I have a daughter and 3 grandchildren that live in BC that can see some of the fires from their porch, and I understand the fear that they have. As a city councillor, you know that I moved more motions to address climate change in the city of Winnipeg than any other councillor, and we're successful on many of them. It's one of the reasons I joined the Progressive Conservative Party. Climate action is not just an option, but an imperative that serves as a cornerstone of all policy decisions. We are already embarking on transformative journeys, directing substantial financial resources towards eco-friendly initiatives, with the current year seeing multi-million-dollar investments that both the NDP and Liberal voted against, such as the Conservation and Climate Fund, the Transportation Program, and the Water Strategy Action Plan, and that's just a few. Our allegiance to sustainable practices is unshakable. We recognize that climate mitigation is intrinsically, thank you, linked with our, I could spell it but can't say it, our duty to safeguard public health and counteract the surge of infectious diseases stemming from extreme climate events. Listen, our PC government is committed to safeguarding our environment. That's why I'm here. And we are ensuring our future prosperity are inseparable objectives. Again, while the NDP didn't meet any of their environmental targets in 17 years, we are achieving success. And you can rest assured that climate mitigation and adaptation are not hollow catchphrases or political promises. We stand by them as guiding beacons of our action, and we remain committed to immediate, tangible steps to pave the way forward for a more secure, healthier, and sustainable future for everyone.
All right, thank you. We're all kind of warmed up here. Before I get to question two, the whole idea of this question is, and I think you attacked it at the kind of the green mantra, is in government you have an entity that's called Treasury Board, and they're the ones that kind of handle the purse strings of government. Anything that is major goes through Treasury Board. And I'm just wondering, you know, is there anything in the NDP platform that looks at climate very much like Treasury Board, that everything has to be vetted through a climate template to see whether it is climate friendly or climate averse? Because that's kind of the spirit and what the heart of question one is all about. What is in place beyond policy to make sure that climate is the consideration, that if there's something that goes against good, sound climate principles, that's something that, sorry, come back when it adheres to those principles. Is there anything in the NDP platform that addresses that? Take about 20 seconds.
I can speak to my experience of the last 4 years where we have used that lens, a climate lens, around every policy conversation, and I'm going to add to that. We use a racialized lens. We look at relationships, good relationships with Indigenous people, which is such an important part of this conversation.
And that's part of the platform that, if you are lucky enough to get government on the third, so we're going to hear about that throughout the campaign?
We've already spoken about the relationships with Indigenous people when it comes to reaching the goal of 30% land protection. We cannot move forward.
I look forward to that structure in government. Douglas Lamont, same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things we said is to say that, to make it clear, all these decisions are made through a lens of climate change and what that impact is. And some of it is, and like, we haven't gotten to all of our policies, but you have to be making sure this is the most important thing. I mean, part of it is that I've been concerned about it for 30 years. There are articles going back 100 plus years talking about coal causing climate change, right? It's not a new thing. But yeah, absolutely. Yes, there need to be rules, or there needs to be a policy set from the top to say, look, this is going to be part of it. We've said it's in our platform that we look through these things through a lens of
I think it's already in your kind of mantra from the Greens, but take 20 seconds if you want to.
Since I read Rachel Carson's Silent Spring when I was 12. Since I read Rachel Carson's Silent Spring when I was 12, I have been working to try and make the polluters pay.
Oh, I got work for you. I've got a few stories. Kevin Klein, it's easier in opposition to do this, but once you get into government, there are certain realities. But what is the structure of government that really vets on that climate template?
My decision to join the Progressive Conservatives took that into account, and I'm happy to say that I am on the Treasury Board, and when we make decisions, we make a whole of government decision. We look at it from every possible angle that impacts all of government. We look at water, we look at agriculture, we look at the environment, we look at our goals, we look at the objectives that we have in place. And that's why I'm there. I'm there to make sure that I'm asking those questions and that I'm holding our Treasury Board members accountable. But I can tell you, as a team member and new team member, we do consider a whole of government approach, including environment, to every decision we've made.
Okay. I'm going to come back to you on that when I ask you for some very specific examples. Hint, hint, silica. The climate crisis impact Manitoba farms. This is question 2 in food systems, and we'll begin with Douglas Lamont, but it's also a chance to restructure and reimagine how we farm and feed our province and the world. Over 40% of GHG emissions in Manitoba come from the food and farming sector, including agriculture, agricultural fuel use, and the manufacturing of agricultural inputs, which is a higher percentage than any other province or territory in Canada. What measures would your government implement to support farmers so we can increase our prairie biodiversity and meet our Paris Agreement obligations? Douglas Lamont, 2 minutes.
Yeah, we have to recognize how much agriculture matters. I just met with Keystone agriculture producers the other day, and as they reminded us, the only reason we eat is because of farmers. It's a necessity of life. It's still a very highly risky. So there are unique challenges, and we have to be working really closely with producers to make sure all those programs are working. It is why we proposed the $300 million green plan, because lots of places are in debt, but and farmers are struggling with debt. They don't necessarily have the funds to make this stuff happen. So part of it is to have rewilding programs, and we actually introduced legislation for nature corridors, and the funds would be used to have producers, private landowners, RMs, First Nations, and parks all working together to be able to create these wildlife corridors. That's one of the things we would do. Compensating farmers through what's called ALICE, the Alternative Land Use Services Program. So you're basically saying, look, we will compensate you. It's the opposite of a carbon tax. We're giving you a carbon payment. We will actually, if you're going to build a carbon sink, if you're going to build wetlands, trees, we will actually compensate you for that to some degree. And the other issue, it's a really important technical one, but excess nitrous oxide, it's 320 times more powerful than CO2 as a greenhouse gas emission. If we can work with farmers to bring down that waste, we can reduce the impact of agriculture. It would be like taking every single truck and car off the road in Manitoba without taking every single truck and car off the road in Manitoba. So working with agriculture is absolutely key, because you're dealing with super high intensity greenhouse gases that need to be reduced.
Thank you so very much. Kennedy Gibson.
Simplot, the chemical fertilizer plant in Portage, produces the most greenhouse gas emissions of anything in Manitoba. We need to be helping our farmers get off their addiction to chemicals. All the extension support was withdrawn, and now it's through input suppliers. That needs to change. All of the supports that we would require for a local, organic, resilient agriculture needs to be put in place because of the great amount of reduction of greenhouse gas emissions that will happen with a more organic agriculture. The incentives for biodiversity, right now over 27 US states pay all or some of the certification to become certified organic. None of that happens here in Manitoba. We need conservation easements and land trusts. You know, if we would honor the treaties and support Indigenous communities in the way they have managed fairly major agricultural production for over 22,000 years without the damage we've created in the last 150. So more policy integration. We need to pay for the eco-services. I've been lobbying for years. Why are they paying taxes on marshland? This is why marshland is being drained for production in areas where it should not happen. So we need to pay to move away from the industrial agriculture that's destroying our water systems and our ecosystems. We need to ensure that our pollinators are protected, and there are many different areas that the pollinators are under attack. The whole respect for the biodiversity, which so clearly comes from organic agriculture, has not been funded adequately. There's so much funding needed in technical assistance and training. We need to be moving our agricultural equipment to electric power sources or alternative fuel power sources, and promoting the planting of trees and carbon farming practices.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Let's move on to Kevin Klein for the Progressive Conservatives.
First of all, a huge thank you to all farmers. I don't know when the last time is that you thanked a farmer, but I've been blessed to tour a number of farms in my role with the government, and I can tell you it's not an easy job. It's certainly a lot of tough work, but it is a necessary job, and we must be grateful for them. And I can also tell you our PC government is resolute in supporting our farmers and striving to enrich prairie biodiversity, all while remaining steadfast on our commitment to the tenets of the Paris Agreement. And I got to correct a couple of things. Our government, our PC government, does fund farmers not to farm on wetlands. I'm not sure why My colleagues don't know that, but we provide funding through the Manitoba Habitat Heritage Corporation that is very, very engaged in that very process. We invest to help protect lands, and we are helping farmers with the payments on that. We are also, in our time, traveling around speaking to Manitobans that are creating innovative ways to address chemicals for fertilization. There's a small company in Morden. If you haven't seen them, please go online and check them out, called EnviroClean. They have developed a process where they take all organic waste, food, cardboard, paper, trees, branches, grass, they dump it into the machinery that they have designed, and in 24 hours, it produces 100% organic fertilizer for them, topsoil. And they can use that as opposed to using the other chemicals because they have all the ingredients. They've done this through their processing. How are we going to advance? Not by making promises, not by telling you we're going to spend millions and millions of dollars. It's by getting out of the legislative building and talking to the people that are making things happen. And there's a lot of them that are making things happen, and that is what our government does. We support the people of Manitoba, and we will support innovation in green technology.
Thank you. I love it when politicians start talking about organic fertilizer. Anyway.
I should have wore a Target.
That's okay. I was going to ask you if you've ever milked a cow.
I did.
Not in those shoes. Lisa Naylor for the NDP.
Thank you. And while you didn't ask, I have also milked a cow, and not in these shoes. I want to thank both Janine and Dugald for bringing forward some important elements on this conversation. And to be honest, I've learned a lot from Janine over the last few years around agriculture and organic farming when I was in the role of environment critic, so I'm grateful to her for that. I just want to add that, certainly the Manitoba NDP is committed to investing in regenerative agriculture to help farmers in the transition. But some of the challenges that farmers have faced the last 7 years have really gotten in the way of that ability to make that transition. They have to be supported in their work, and the PC government has hurt farmers. They've hurt the farming community, and there's no question about that. They have had to spend their energy fighting the government rather than fighting climate change. The government jacked up Crown leases by 300% or more and only released their plans to do this after the 2019 election. They opened the market to out-of-province corporate renters and removed regulations, making it harder for Manitoba farmers who care about the environment to even compete. And they also shut down 21 Manitoba agriculture service locations around the province, which created a lot of additional challenges. So a lot of our time in opposition with the agriculture sector has just been trying to support them through some of these very difficult challenges that have been put in their way by the current government. If we can get past all of that, then it's an opportunity to help farmers take the next step to regenerative agriculture.
So if we can open up all the mics, I'll give you about 20 seconds each because you did bring some charges up, and I don't mind, Mr. Klein, that you can respond to that.
Again, call me Kevin. Listen, some of the charges are inaccurate. It's misinformation and it's kind of twisted. The reality is we are spending time with farmers on the farms. I have met with the CAP organization on a couple of occasions. We've met with all the farmers, and we are getting work done, and we are moving forward and building a pathway. What the NDP government did in 17 years? Nothing.
Janine Gibson.
You've been helping people farm the system, not actually build soil and feed people.
Dugald Lamont?
That's inaccurate.
Yeah, no, just on the charges of the Crown leases, we drove up to Crane River to meet with a whole bunch of Métis ranchers and other farmers who are facing the loss of decades and decades of being tenant farmers because of the changes where the PC government just said, you guys aren't paying enough in rent on your land, we're gonna crank it up and you're all gonna lose your homes. And
Quick last word to Lisa Naylor, then we're gonna move on.
A lot of young farmers care about a just transition, but a lot of young farmers or people who want to farm can't even get in the game because of what the PC government has done.
Okay, so we're going to begin the next round here with Janine Gibson of the Green Party. And again, I don't mind, a little bit of rejoiners. Let's be constructive in this. And if you agree on things, great. If you don't, let's try to drill down a little bit more on why. Number 3, a just transition will move us out of a fossil fuel-based economy and in a way that leaves no one behind. In Manitoba, decent unionized jobs can be created, retrofitting buildings to net zero, in sustainable transportation, solar, and wind to get Manitoba off fossil fuels. Social procurement, community benefit agreements ensure that public spending eliminates barriers to employment and creates decent jobs. If elected, what would your government do to transition Manitoba to a green economy with sustainable, stable, and well-paying decent jobs?
There are trillions of dollars being invested, and we think Manitoba should open a green bonds fund where investors can put money towards helping jobs transition. We envision massive mobilization of jobs, creating jobs, tapping into paying people to say, how can they green up the job they're currently doing? How can we make massive shifts into funding the kind of healthy, environmentally sound energy efficiency programs? There could be way more geothermal. That creates tons of jobs. Way more construction to the correct building codes, like a level 4, where we're actually ensuring that the retrofitting of buildings reduces energy consumption. We want to see massive public transportation expansion, electrical trains between provinces and between all cities. We could really be improving our efficiency of our electricity. We could really be supporting our farmers and doing way more carbon capture. Every farm I know needs more workers. There's massive training need to happen in how we produce food. As an organic inspector who works with inspectors around the world, that's where we're going to suffer first, is in the supply chain for food production. And every farm needs more workers. So we really need to improve our waste recycling. Yes, robotics would help that be more efficient, but massive jobs need to be in there so that we're actually able to reduce what we're taking from the earth in a negative way and reusing what we're taking from mining at this time. To retrofit so many of our resource extractions like logging, lumber, mining, massive jobs can be created. And we believe that we can successfully fund this mobilization to a just and green economy by ensuring that we respect the communities that are involved.
Thank you so very much. Go ahead.
Lots of ideas shared, no substance on how to get it done. The potash mines, for example, are fully electric. Again, this was done under the PC Manitoba government. I want to acknowledge that we have to work with innovators. Government cannot fix this problem alone, and none of us up here should be saying we can. We have to work with the innovators, young entrepreneurs, business leaders in our province who are green, innovative leaders already. Leaders like the company I talked about, EnviroClean. Let's look at what the city of Selkirk has done with their new water treatment plant and now a hydrogen plant next door to it that will be buying the treated water from Selkirk. That's the circular economy that's creating more and more jobs. Let's look at Gardwine Transportation, who invested in the first fully electric transport truck in Western Canada, and an electrical fleet for deliveries within the city, and they're also trying to get them up to Thompson and other areas. We need to support them. What does the NDP want to do? Get rid of the gas tax, $4,000 for an EV vehicle. $4,000 when you're buying a F-150 Lightning, which is over $120,000, is not going to help that person make the decision. We have to invest in transit, and as a city councillor that fought hard to make sure that our transit buses were converted to electric, or now we can convert them to hydrogen. We are doing that work. We have a city task force that I started that is doing that work. We need to invest money, not give $4,000 or take gas tax off the gas. We have to invest those dollars into more bike paths, into an efficient transit system. It has to be efficient for people to use it. Our PC government's allegiance to sustainable practices is unshakable, and we recognize the importance of the green economy, and we are making Manitoba the leader in Canada in the green economy.
Lisa Naylor.
Thank you.
Respect everyone. We kind of took that pledge, right? Lisa Naylor.
Folks, the NDP cares about workers and creating local jobs. And while the PCs have tried to eliminate Manitoba jobs by bringing in P3 projects, such as their attempt for the North End water treatment plant, the NDP will always stand up for working people. Manitoba can have it both. We can have well-paying jobs that also support the provincial transition to a healthier climate. I can't give away all the details yet, but please watch for an exciting NDP commitment coming forward about geothermal heating. Not only will this make a big impact on reducing GHG emissions, but it will create thousands of new Manitoba jobs and save homeowners money. New Flyer is another great employer here in Winnipeg who manufactures electric and hydrogen buses, but unfortunately the PCs have not invested, and the Manitoba NDP will be different. We will invest in electric manufacturing, creating more jobs in Manitoba and clean energy transportation. Our party works to bring together Indigenous, rural, urban, northern, farmers, the labor movement, and other working people. And any party can have all the great policy ideas in the world, but if we can't bring people together, then nothing's going to get done. We will work towards the federal government's net zero target for 2050, and we will make Manitoba a climate leader and a desirable location for new businesses and green industry.
Thank you. Douglas Lamont.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. Look, to address Mr. Klein's comment, the idea that we have to work with the private sector, one of the biggest problems is that for 30 years, everyone has been saying we need to leave this to the private sector to fix. We need to let the market fix it, let the market fix it. And the market doesn't want to fix it because it's run by oil companies, right? And I'm sorry, right now, the PCs are running against, they pretend that my party doesn't exist, and they pretend that Justin Trudeau is the leader of my party. And they're running against the carbon tax. Why is that? They can't make any difference about it. And the PCs and the NDP have announced a massive gas tax, which is just, it's a fiscal disaster and it's an environmental catastrophe. You're literally spending money to keep the same things going. It doesn't make any sense at all. So, and I will say one thing, which, like the NDP, they didn't do anything for 17 years. And this is a quote from somebody in the paper, in the Free Press. Bluntly, the Pallister-Stephenson governments have done less to mitigate the devastating impacts of future generations of changing climate than any other government in Canada, Alberta included. So, what I will say, we'll go back to the $300 million annual green fund, which it is designed to do exactly that. It's not just about jobs, it's also about capital so that farmers and businesses can make those changes. We can do deep energy retrofits. The other is a Manitoba Business Development Bank, which is a politically independent bank, so we're not handing out free money and grants to people or tax breaks and corporate welfare. We want to take that down. We want an independent Manitoba Business Development Bank that provides equity to people who want to start businesses and farmers. So it's just farmers, it's just business. If you want to start a business, if you want to start a regenerative farm, we would be there for you. That's our principle.
Thank you. This segues into kind of the next question here rather well, and then I'll take some time because you know, you folks hired one of the more internationally prestigious companies in Dunsky to do what I thought was a very good, you know, look, and what I saw from Manitoba Hydro was quite different from Dunsky, and I hope your government will release the entire Dunsky report because there are many volumes to it as opposed to the 30 pages online. Energy and generation and use will play an important role in Manitoba's transition to a more sustainable future. The energy roadmap released by the Government of Manitoba provides a pathway for change to regulation of energy in our province. What is your future vision of energy governance in Manitoba? How would you meet the electrification of our economy that is required to meet Canada's goal of a net zero electricity grid of 2035? And I would add to that is, why don't we have an energy policy, an overarching plan in Manitoba, and why do we just leave it to Manitoba Hydro to do it? We'll begin with you, Mr. Klein.
I believe what Hydro put out and what the announcement did talk about putting together an energy plan. And I think from the announcements we all can tell that RPC government is committed to the creation of a well-compensated, respectable employment. By leading the charge in initiatives like retrofitting buildings to attain net zero energy consumption and investing in sustainable modes of transportation, such as solar and wind power solutions for energy as well, we are working to lay the groundwork for an empowered and stable workforce. When you look at the energy report that came out, we've made it very clear that we are in a very unique position with 97% of our energy clean. We are a leader in Canada. We have put a roadmap that revolves around 4 critical goals that anchor our energy strategy framework. Modernizing energy governance, that hasn't been done for decades. Attracting investment and jobs based on the fact that we can deliver, and we will always deliver, clean energy. Affordability and competitiveness. Low carbon leadership. Manitoba is poised to lead in the low carbon arena. Through strategic actions, we aim to position the province as a trailblazer in reducing carbon emissions while sustaining prosperity. The roadmap charters a course through the key areas that are crucial in achieving energy objectives. Meeting Canada's target of net zero electricity grid by 2035 requires ambitious but realistic goals. We are steadfast in our commitment. Our PC government is positioning Manitoba at the forefront of the net zero journey by strategically leveraging renewable energy sources, promoting energy efficiency, and fostering innovation.
Lisa Naylor.
Not only do the PCs not have a plan to work towards a net zero grid, but they are promising to spend millions of dollars again to fight the federal government in their efforts to reach net zero. They simply aren't credible on this question, Richard. It's clear that Heather Stefanson is not a climate leader. Under the Pallister-Stefanson government, greenhouse gas emissions are at an all-time high and growing faster than ever, and CO2 emissions.
Greenhouse gas was reduced by 1 megaton.
I'm going to have to let her, please. We'll have some time after.
Emissions have increased year after year under this government. With the low carbon energy advantage of Manitoba Hydro, our province should be a leader in clean energy production. But Heather Stefanson actually cut Hydro's clean energy programs and rolled back energy efficiency. We will make it easier and more affordable to drive an electric vehicle in Manitoba by building more EV charging stations and providing subsidies for electric vehicle purchases for both new and used EV and plug-ins. And there is a cost standard set by the federal government so that we're not subsidizing vehicles for people who can afford $105,000 vehicles. We will move our transit buses off of diesel by building more electric transit buses and putting them on the road across the province. I also, if we're going to speak about energy, hydro, and the energy grid, I need to talk about the past, reconciling the past and the ongoing environmental concerns and economic impacts of hydroelectric developments. I am proud to be on a team with so many strong Indigenous leaders, and reconciliation is not just a talking point to our team. Over the past 4 years, we've engaged in meaningful work as a caucus to enhance our own knowledge and understanding of the past, and we will use that knowledge to help Manitobans move into a future that is mindful of the impacts of any kind of policy on the lives and lands of Indigenous people. Our team has demonstrated our commitment to the TRC's calls to action and the MMIWG Commission calls to justice, and we know that any further hydro development must integrate these calls to action and justice and move forward only with the consent of those impacted by the developments. We are committed to moving forward on our clean energy grid in this way.
Thank you. Yeah, there's lots of blame in what happened in the 60s, 70s, and 80s to go, and there's a lot that needs to be done to reconcile that past. 2 minutes. Go ahead, Dougal Lamont.
I'll just say that it's not just the 80s. It's not just the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
I hear you.
It has not stopped. When we talk about we talk about the harms of the past, we don't talk enough about the harms of the present. So, but sorry, that's not
Fair.
the question. So, when it comes to this is a really important question, actually, but the energy roadmap released by the government of Manitoba, because it was, sort of a few slides off a deck. It was released on July 28th. Many people didn't read it. I had to be made aware of it because I was doing something else that day. But look, it is really serious because they talk about changing governance. And that sounds like, well, we're going to change the way we're going to organize the board. Governance for hydro is what its mandate is. Its central mandate is that it needs to provide low-cost energy to Manitobans. If you're talking about changing the governance of Manitoba Hydro, you may be talking about changing that. Whether its mandate is going to be that way, because that has been a huge struggle between the Public Utilities Board, Manitoba Hydro, and successive governments. Gary Dewar hated the PUB. He wanted to replace it because they actually were lowering hydro rates back in 2003. The PCs have gone and actually they went right over the heads of the PUB and started putting stuff into legislation. So our position is we have to have hands-off hydro, but hydro has to be independent, it has to be public, it has to be regulated by the PUB. And I will say, Richard, you're absolutely right. We can't just have consultants and hydro coming up with plans for our province. This is a huge problem for our democracy because you say, well, why be an MLA when you can get so much more work done going to work as a consultant for Deloitte? Because that's who's really going to listen to you, right? That's who actually gets hired. And your pay is, I'm not planning I am running for re-election, by the way. So, yeah. I'm not. And let's face it,
all
I'd be
four of you
a
are future
terrible
consultants,
consultant.
at least three of you.
No. I'll be in McDonald's because I look great in polyester.
Okay, well, we said we're...
But seriously, no, we do need to, because there is a risk we're talking about where they're saying, well, maybe we'll just add a whole bunch of this other private generation. There needs to be a discussion about this. To drop an incredibly important document like this 2 months before an election, when the PCs might say, "Oh, look, thank you for voting for this."
I'm glad they actually put it out. I'm glad they actually put it out there, and I encourage you folks to read Dunsky and then read what Hydro came out with it, because they're very different. And I would encourage the minister who is here to release the full Dunsky report, because I think there's some real interesting reading in there. Anyway.
No. So as a media person, we need to do research. We know that. We've both been in the media. You still are. That report is through edit. It doesn't come through the environment and climate.
Okay, so you don't have the power. That's fine. Go ahead, Janine.
I don't have the power.
We've made energy transitions before, and we can do it again. We really believe the Manitoba Climate Action Team's Road to Resilience strategies are well thought out and effective and should be put into action. We need a Manitoba Energy Savings Authority. Thank you. We need to make sure that an energy policy framework for Manitoba is supported, that we need to modernize governance and institutional mandates, but maintain Hydro's central role as a Crown corporation, a Crown-owned company. We believe at the Green Party that we must start many more Crown-owned corporations, because the private sector is not doing what needs to be done. And just as we had to use Crown organizations, Crown businesses in the Second World War, we think we need to address the true climate emergency we are facing and create more Crown corporations. So certainly support Hydro as thank you, as being independent and in no way modernized to be privatized. So yes, we support the Dunsky report. We think that would work really well. We need to grow emissions-free electricity, and that includes respecting the TRC and putting those into it, because it's not just the emissions from the electricity, it's the community damage that's happened as well. It's not just the riparian areas of our watersheds like Lake Winnipeg that are suffering from the way hydro manages our beautiful water resources like a pool. We need to improve our hydroelectricity optimization for it to be truly green. We can also make major improvements in how we support wind. Wind power, I've lived with wind power personally, and solar power, that could be done so much more. We can position Manitoba as true low-carbon leaders and leverage more federal support.
Thank you so very much. I'm just interested, maybe show of hands here. If you could afford to do it, or if there were some plan in place that was out there, would you spend the money to replace and make your home or your place where you live more energy efficient in the sense of windows, furnace, and insulation? How many people would love to do that? You've done it, but no, how many people haven't done it but would like to be able to do it? Because you can't afford it, or there aren't the programs out there. All right, that's very informative to the four of you, because that does speak to the whole idea of reduce, right? And we talk about for years Manitoba Hydro was all about building dams, and now they're transitioning as a corporation that now has to start thinking about the efficient use of energy. But it begins with us. It begins at home. And then at some point, what do we do, and how can you four help us do the right thing? And in some of these answers, I think relatability is one thing that we all strive to do, even in my world, is to relate. And I'm hearing more and more of people wanting to do the right thing, but there's that disconnect at times with policies on that. Thank you so very much. We're going to go on to number 5.
If I can add one thing to that, though.
That's fine, and you can use it in your answer to question number 5. Manitoba's Expert Advisory Council to the Minister of Conservation and Climate recommended a green transportation strategy for Manitoba back in 2021. The transportation sector contributes about 40% of our total GHG emissions, and there is a need for more support of active transportation, including intercommunity transportation options. The EAC identified priorities for greening transportation in Manitoba, including low carbon, zero emission transportation modes, adaptation of new technologies and practices, and active transportation infrastructure. So the question is, what priorities and regulatory approaches would you include in a green transportation strategy for Manitoba? It goes to vehicles, it goes to roads, it goes to oversight, those types of policies. Lisa Naylor.
Thanks. There are a lot of good recommendations in that report. It's been over 2 years. The government hasn't implemented any of them. And during that time, the Pallister-Stephenson government made a lot of cuts. In fact, 7 years of freezing funding, the funding transfers to municipalities, especially to the city of Winnipeg, which forced them to reduce transit service. It made a difference in transit service in Brandon and Selkirk as well. So it's really important that municipalities know what to expect around funding, that they can plan year after year, and that those transfers keep up with the rate of inflation and don't get frozen for years on end. Our Climate First initiatives include improving and adequately funding public transportation and working with municipalities to make transportation both affordable and safe. I've actually sat down and met with a number of frontline workers in transit. We know it's important to integrate safety for drivers and for riders as a critical part of motivating folks to use these systems. And having used the transit system myself for decades, I'm very familiar with what is needed. We've made our commitments on electric vehicles, rebates both for new EVs and hybrids, and a rebate for used vehicles as well, to ensure that regular Manitobans can make the switch to EVs in an affordable way. We know that this commitment also requires a significant commitment to EV infrastructure, and the details of that will be forthcoming in an announcement during the election period. One thing I want to mention is the funding that was cut to a number of environmental organizations, Green Action Center, Manitoba Eco-Network, and Climate Change Connection. These were all cut about 4 years ago. And every one of these organizations provides education and motivation to Manitobans. They did a lot of work, Green Action Center did a lot of work around active transportation, other topics that aren't covered under this question, like, you know, recycling, reusing, composting, but things that help regular Manitobans adopt more environmentally friendly things. And so we've already committed to replace that, to refund those organizations, because we want Manitobans to be educated and motivated, and we want to work closely with our partners.
Thank you very much. Yeah, the question asks what priorities and regulatory approaches. The one thing I have to say, which builds on what Richard mentioned, but it's not just a question of regulation, it's a question of funding. It's, you know, the spirit is willing, but the wallet is weak. But with inflation, with high levels of debt, I mean, before the pandemic, a huge number of Manitobans are only $200 away, $200 a month away from insolvency, and a huge proportion of Manitobans are actually technically insolvent, and it's only gotten worse. So recognizing that for a whole bunch of people, there are big challenges. So one of our big focuses, I'm not as keen on EV rebates. I know people like them. There are things that have been done in BC and Quebec where the government just mandates and requires that governments on the car sales have a portion of EVs available. They do have rebates as well, but you say, look, if you're going to sell gas cars, you're going to sell EV cars as well. It makes a big difference. Again, I have that challenge of I'm not as big of a fan of EV rebates in a province where we have such deep poverty. You know, there are people that's half their salary. That's half their salary for a year. So, so the flip side of that is that instead of just replacing cars, let's find ways to move people around in a way that's much better. Transit is one. We can have a much better transit system than we do. So increasing 50-50 funding in Winnipeg, but also looking at other municipalities who are looking to expand or create transit options. Brandon, Portage La Prairie, there are people who could work in Portage who can't get jobs in Portage La Prairie, and there are places who can't get workers because there's no bus. It's as simple as that. So again, the one other thing is looking into funding for green hydrogen generation at Centerport and other fueling depots. We'd also commission a study on rail rationalization to determine the feasibility of relocating heavy rail traffic outside of Winnipeg, and then using the vacated rail lines for a citywide commuter rail system on electric trains. I know everyone says this will cost too much.
That's time.
That's why we need a feasibility study. So
another study.
There hasn't been one since well, we need one. The one from 1975 said it was like $75. There's been inflation since then.
Thank you. Go ahead. Another study. Okay. It's hard sometimes. Go ahead.
Well, let's respect Manitoba's Expert Advisory Council and their recommendations that they made. You know, why haven't we moved on those? So, and in part of that, in addressing the challenges that Manitobans have in moving around, and as a rural person, those are very real and have affected a lot of people, especially women and children in my experience. We also need to address mobility challenges, such as the Disability Matters folks talk about, because there could be, in the cities, all our urban centers need to, our public transportation needs to be electric and it needs to be free, and we need to be supporting our workers and our families with that kind of development of incentives. Yes, so the hybrid vehicles and the EVs come lower down because of the amount of poverty that we are addressing in Manitoba. So we do believe that a part of what's necessary to support transportation and infrastructure greening up are more jobs, along with a guaranteed income, a basic guaranteed income for all people. And this will help increase the adoption of new technologies and practices. We need to fund and educate Manitobans on how they can become more active in transportation infrastructure, what fits for their lives. How can we support our communities with the intercommunity transport? The electric trains could provide to Manitoba, as trains once did. We really need to develop campaigns and educational initiatives to encourage that we move away from single occupancy to more public transport and shared mobility options. We need a lot of regulatory approach to establish vehicle emission standards that align so that we can reduce slowly and transfer over to more electric transportation. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Mr. Klein?
As a city councilor, I can tell you that a lot of the objectives I'm hearing about right now are something that has to happen at the city. And if you followed along city council, I fought tirelessly to change our transit system over to EV. The most economical and the easiest path for them right now is to transfer from diesel to hydrogen. And when others are pushing them on that. But the city of Winnipeg is not pushing forward with that. That is something that we have to build partnerships with the city. You can't mandate it on another level of government. You need to build that partnership. We are investing in electric transportation in RMs. We made an announcement just a few weeks ago. I was in Stonewall making that announcement. We are investing in green transportation. We are investing through our partners at EcoWest in more charging stations. Car dealers are going to be required by their manufacturers to have charging stations. The Manitoba Motor Dealers Association is funding 50% for somebody who wants charging stations. This is all being done. And when we realize that the Expert Advisory Council's invaluable advice seamlessly aligns with our vision for more eco-friendly and sustainable transportation landscape. It's one thing to say it's not, but it is. It really is. Just a few years ago, Wab Canoe vowed to end oil and gas subsidies, and now they're promising to remove the existing tax on fuel. They're not ready. They haven't looked at it. They're just making statements, making promises. The NDP enshrined the Climate Change and Emissions Reduction Acts to legally bind Manitoba to cut emissions to 6% below 1999 levels by 2012. This never happened, and the NDP admitted it wasn't achievable. We announced last year that we reduced our greenhouse gas emissions by 1 megatonne, and we set our next reduction target at 5 megatones. We are getting the job done.
Lisa Naylor, you want a quick response to that?
Oh, sure.
Use your microphone.
I will just respond to say that, this government's had 7 years, and you're hearing about their first electric transportation initiative weeks ahead of an election. I raised these issues week after week in the legislature for the past 4 years and was essentially mocked. So I just encourage my friend here to go back and read some transcripts from those years where there were 3 other environment ministers before him not really doing anything on this file.
You never asked me one question. I
And
was never asked one question by you.
And Mr. Lamont and Ms. Gibson, I think, the Herculean task here is that this doesn't happen in a matter of a next term of a government. This is decades. This goes to, I think of all the homes out there that if you want to park an EV and you want to plug it in overnight, just the infrastructure that is necessary to shift the economy and the investment needed. It's opportunity, but there's also lots that needs to be done here. And I think you all know what needs to be done, but I'm not sure the public understands what needs to be done. And the task is not simply buying an EV car and plugging it in, and boom, we're part of the new economy, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, there are huge challenges because there's massive infrastructure investments that have to be developed. There are huge engineering and technical challenges, whether it's hydrogen, whether it's, even if it's, how do you charge up an EV bus? The one thing I have to say was a friend of mine who's a city planner has always emphasized, look, just getting people on buses is much better. Even if they're a diesel bus, that is still much better than having everybody riding in cars. But the other thing about it, and having spoken to ATU, there are challenges, so there's lots of challenges, right? But the one thing I did want to say to Minister Klein, it is literally the job of the Manitoba government to tell the city of Winnipeg what to do. It is a creature of the
And right now,
province.
the city of Winnipeg has essentially put back the whole transit program on the back burner, essentially, and that's where the province does come in. And you have the dollars and you have the legislative ability to be able to do that. So whoever wins on the 3rd, and I'll give you a few minutes or a couple of seconds here, candidate Gibson, because that's the Herculean task here, is that you do have that ability as a provincial government to say to the city, you shall do this, and here is the legislative framework on how you're going to get it done.
Well, as Hermit the Frog sings, it ain't easy being green. But many of us are very committed, and I think you underestimate the general population and how ready they are for change. Because, thank you, respecting our environment is intimately connected with how much we respect each other, and there's way too little of that happening everywhere that I see. So we need to have compassion for the biology, and we are part of the biology. We cannot be seen as separate from the natural world. We can't live without water. We can't live, and so we need to be more integrated in how we treat each other and where we get our resources.
And this gets us to question 6, and I have that earworm now. It ain't easy being green. Manitoba's impact assessment process hasn't been sustainably updated since the 1980s. Douglas Lamont, you'll go first here. We also do not currently have sustainable development legislation since the Sustainable Development Act was repealed in 2018. Do you plan to modernize Manitoba's environmental approvals process, including impact assessment and licensing under the Environment Act, to better address sustainable development, public health impacts, cumulative effects, climate impacts, and the rights of Indigenous peoples?
The short answer is yes. To put it in context, if you look at, there's a dam, it's called South Indian Lake, where the Manitoba Hydro in the province of Manitoba diverted the single biggest river in Manitoba, completely destroyed one of the largest fisheries in North America, and it ruined the self-sufficiency of the people living there. And that dam had no environmental license. They had an interim license that was renewed year after year, 1 year at a time, while the First Nations there were powerless. So, and the other thing about it is that as I understand, there has never been, I was talking with another First Nations individual who said, when something goes for environmental hearings, they have never said no. So they used to participate and say, well, why do you make this change and this change? It would get a rubber stamp, and none of the changes would be accepted. So instead, they just started saying no, because that way, if they start with saying no, they can actually get some of the changes. So one of the things we've committed to is to set up an Indigenous Secretariat, where you'd have First Nations and other Indigenous nations sitting together. It's a full-time partnership with the Manitoba government to be working with them on implementing UNDRIP as an example, but also making other changes to legislation to reflect that, but also making sure that we're just bringing these things up to date because they've been out of date for decades.
Well, and if you don't do it, what's happened is you ultimately will see you in court. And that's what really has driven and moved the needle over the last several years now. Janine, respond to that. Yeah.
We do need to modernize and replace the Sustainable Development Act, because environmental protection in this province as it exists right now is a joke. And contrary to what other people here have said, that it's being respected, living close to the land and driving across the land to visit farms and support them, I see that our environment is not being protected, and we need legislation. We need to do comprehensive review of all the huge gaps that have been created in the existing legislation that's in place. And we need, once again, to look to the Indigenous communities that were able to live and produce food on quite a large scale. One could even say an industrial scale, without destroying the environment. So we need to have climate impact assessments done of all projects and really listen to the voices of the people that speak to that, not these pseudo consultations that are not real. We need to, thank you. So Indigenous engagement isn't just at the end where there's consenting to projects, all the way through, and supports for communities so they're truly able to mobilize and voice all the concerns that are present from their traditional knowledge bases, not just from the band councils that have been opposed upon the First Nations, but really work with all the people in the community and all the communities to really improve the transparency. As I've spoken to earlier, green MLAs will ensure that actions are transparent and that there is accountability, because we have not seen that. I've worked very hard on protecting the environment, helping to work protecting from the silica mining that is threatening our drinking water, my very well drinking water. And we've just seen the government bend down and say, come on in. And it's shameful, absolutely shameful.
Minister Klein?
Well, I am familiar with many people in this room from my time on City Council again, and I'm going to go back to that because at least I've sat on the government and I've got stuff done. I worked diligently on City Council to get 1,000 acres of urban green space. Not a promise, an action that took me years to get put through, and it was put through. I fought government, I fought the powers that be to stop the sale of the John Bloomberg Golf Course, which is also going to end up being a residential development, taking away much needed green space. Our government, our PC government, I myself, place the preservation of our environment as a top priority. Think what you will because of party colors, but I recognize the critical need for modernization when we are fully committed to the revitalization of Manitoba's environmental approvals process to address the pressing challenges of our time. Actions speak louder than words, and I'll refer back to the many things that we have done recently in the environment and climate. Over $2 million to preserve lands through MMHC. Our vision extends beyond mere compliance. I'm driven to achieve a modernized impact assessment process that resonates with complexities of our time. I have instituted, and our government has instituted, transparent procedures, regular reporting, and rigorous monitoring. And we intend to make the process accessible to all stakeholders and foster an ongoing improvement cycle. I'm committed to modernizing Manitoba's environmental approvals process without question. We're guided by the collective responsibility to protect our environment, to protect my 6 grandkids and their children, and so on, while simultaneously addressing the unique challenges that we have of today. And by upholding our duty to Indigenous peoples and promoting sustainable development, we're shaping an approval process that stands as a testament to our dedication to both the present and future generations.
Well, then appeal the licenses for the CO processing plant in Vivian.
Lisa Naylor?
Stop the destruction at Hollow Water.
Oh, wait your turn.
I want to thank both my Liberal and Green colleagues here. You both have introduced important points. The environment approvals process is very important. It is time to review the criteria through the lens of public health, climate impacts, and UNDRIP, of course. And I will note that every single NDP MLA voted against repealing the Sustainable Development Act back in 2018. We're very proud of that vote, and we stand for proper assessments, something the PCs simply don't want. I will just take a moment to remind my colleague Kevin at the end of the line. I know some of his election materials claimed that he'd fight Heather Stephenson in the legislature if he had to, and I think he's got his work cut out for him with all this passion on environment. So best of luck, sir.
I don't give up.
Let's move on. Do you have your little cards there, the yes/no stuff?
We can't address the other stuff.
The yes/no? Do you have the yes/no cards? You know, the clock is my enemy, Councillor. I'm sorry, Minister. The clock is my enemy. So these are the yes/no questions. So I'm going to read the question, and then you can hold your placard nice and high, and try not to do one of those because, anyway. On the climate crisis, the 2030 emissions reduction plan, ambitious, achievable roadmap that outlines a sector-by-sector path for Canada to reach its emissions reduction target of 45% below 2005 levels by 2030. Will your government meet this commitment? Crowd saying good luck. On energy, Manitoba Hydro just recently released their first ever integrated resource plan and predict that electricity demand could more than double in the next 20 years. Would you refer the IRP to the Manitoba Public Utilities Board for a thorough public review? Well, then you do one of those. That's fine.
Listen, I want to be honest in my answers, and I don't want to flip it around.
So question number 3, it's placards only. It's placards only. Play by the rules. Efficiency Manitoba's mandate, and I could add to that, beyond the Public Utilities Board, maybe the Clean Environment Commission, which is very thorough. But anyway, Efficiency Manitoba's mandate recognizes the need to achieve greenhouse gas emissions reductions. However, no emission reduction targets have been established. Would your government update Efficiency Manitoba's mandate to include GHG reduction targets? Okay. I would like to see Efficiency Manitoba actually make it to public accounts. I don't think they have. Manitoba's provincial planning regulation on active transportation supports linkages between public transit, streets, sidewalks, river corridors, pathways, and green spaces to form interconnected networks. Given the long-term adverse effects of physical inactivity on mental and physical health, will you work to create policy with supporting legislation that supports active travel by funding and providing necessary infrastructure for active living in all communities? Come on, no one's against this. Okay. I'm against being healthy.
This isn't that 15-minute cities, is it? That Jordan Peterson's been talking about, Richard?
Canada's 2 billion tree program was recently audited by the Federal Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development. Findings indicate that Canada's forests are becoming a net source of GHG emissions because of forest fires and disturbances caused by insect outbreaks. And at the pace of rollout, the program will not meet its objective of 2 billion trees planted by 2030. Will you increase provincial funding to help meet the 2 billion tree goal and to ensure that provincial and urban forests are protected, maintained, and diversified? Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Peatlands are the world's largest terrestrial carbon sink, making them critical for preventing and mitigating the effects of climate change. It represents 1/3 of Manitoba's land area and are one of the richest ecosystems in terms of biodiversity. Now, since the Manitoba government has introduced legislation focusing on mining peatlands, it has become evident that disturbing pristine peatlands areas is not sustainable and will not help reduce our carbon footprint. Will your government commit to producing a plan within the first year in office that will phase out peat mining in Manitoba by 2030?
I've actively worked against it for years.
Hey, they're being honest. That's good. Given the challenges that smaller rural communities face in Manitoba when recycling and composting, will your government provide additional financial incentives to help them improve their waste management systems? Yeah. The Department of Environment and Climate examined the current state of waste diversion and recycling programs in Manitoba back in 2020. In some aspects, Manitoba has become a leader in developing stewardship programs. However, Manitoba's diversion rate, currently at 18%, is far from the 50% target set, and Manitoba is falling behind other jurisdictions in Canada. If elected, will your government provide the necessary funding to enable the province to increase waste diversion rates to reach that 50% target? Yeah. Citizens who reside near industrial operations and railway operations face a higher burden of environmental and health impacts due to increased exposure to toxic substances, environmental emergencies, and other hazards. Would your government work with the City of Winnipeg federal government to conduct a feasibility study on relocating and rationalizing major rail yards and rail lines.
I didn't just read ahead.
I know you did. Yeah. No. Are you in favor of rail relocation? City of Winnipeg federal government to conduct a feasibility study on relocating and rationalizing major rail lines and rail yards. Okay, good. I thought you would be. In December 2022, there's only 17 more of these. In December 2022, Canada signed the historic Coming Montreal Global Diversity Agreement that sets 23 global biodiversity targets to be reached by 2030. 196 nation states signed on the agreement. Target 7 calls for reducing the overall risk from pesticides by at least half, including through integrated pest management. Will your government commit to supporting Canada meet Target 7 by reinstating cosmetic pesticide reductions?
So to be clear, we follow the Canadian standard for pesticides.
Boo, boo.
Okay, no, thank you. It's tough. It's tough on a politician to ask them on a yes or no. It's tough. I get that. Given the asbestos is classified as a known human carcinogen, will your government compel municipalities that have asbestos cement drinking water supply pipes to test for and characterize asbestos fibers consistent with international best practices? Yeah, I can't see you saying no to that. Among 30%, Manitobans rely on groundwater for domestic needs. However, we're seeing more and more development infringing on our source drinking water. Would you enact even stricter laws by protecting our source drinking water? The yearly average of phosphorus loading to Lake Winnipeg continues to be twice of the desired target that has been set by the Department of Environment and Climate. Do you have a strategy for reducing excess phosphorus in Lake Winnipeg? Yeah. Just a couple more. Environment human rights, such as the right to clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, have been recognized by governments around the world as an important way to protect the health of citizens and ensure access to environmental justice. However, Manitoba has yet to legally recognize the environmental rights of its citizens. Do you plan to legally recognize the environmental rights of Manitobans, such as through the adoption of an environmental bill of rights? Interesting. Yeah, support that? Okay. We got the videotape. Manitobans with environmental and health concerns about natural resource developments and agricultural operations have been increasingly pressured to silence their voices after receiving legal threats from the proponents of such activities. One option for promoting access to environmental justice and protecting Manitobans from frivolous lawsuits, also known as strategic lawsuits against public participation, involves adopting what's called anti-SLAPP legislation. Do you plan to introduce anti-SLAPP legislation?
We already did. We introduced the bill this spring. So.
Okay, and it got passed?
No, but we did, and we will reintroduce it.
Thank you.
We'll support it.
Okay. Okay. We got a few more minutes? Yeah, we got a few more minutes? Couple more minutes? Yeah, a couple more minutes? Okay. Because I'm interested in some of the audience questions here. We'll take about 20, 30 seconds each. Reducing energy needs not only to reduce emissions, but also to make life more affordable for Manitobans. What will your party do to make deep energy retrofits more accessible to Manitobans? Remember how many people raised their hands here? Douglas Lamont, what would you do to help that process?
So yeah, that would be something that would be paid for through the $300 million green fund. Yeah.
Klein?
A lot of the programs are available through Efficiency Manitoba right now, and it is being reviewed to offer more as we go forward.
Yeah, and a lot of those programs, again, targeted for people that can't afford it.
Yep.
Really good, but for a whole lot of people that are being hit by inflation right now.
We would support massive geothermal support for people to reduce their energy needs.
And
$500,000.
No, it's in Dunsky. Read the report. Go ahead, Naylor.
I did.
We will increase the types of rebates available, and also we will be announcing our geothermal plan very shortly.
Okay. Connectivity along waterways is essentially for conserving biodiversity and increasingly fragmented natural ecosystems and communities. How would you protect and connect land along river corridors? Good question. Minister Klein?
We're working right now with our conservation department on protecting lands, of course, near riverbeds, and we also are working diligently with the federal ministers of conservation and the environment to talk about more ways that we can conserve the land together and take a more all-of-government approach.
Lisa Naylor? Lisa Naylor? Lisa Naylor?
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
This feels technically specific, and I'm not sure I have an adequate answer, but I will say that land protection is a key platform announcement for us. We are going to work with communities from across the province in the different ways we protect land and water, and biodiversity is obviously a driving force for that.
Janine?
I'd like to respond. In terms of access to environmental justice, I call for the funding for the First Nation Treaty Land Entitlement Commission, which needs adequate funding, as does ensuring that Manitoba lobby the federal government for faster decisions as all land becomes federal prior to release to First Nations. And we really need to make sure that all communications about treaty land entitlements is non-colonial, accessible, and provides capacity for response.
Yeah, the question about connectivity around waterways, that's about creating wilderness corridors. Yeah. So there's different ways. Basically, one of the challenges is that we have a bunch of parks that are like islands, and species can't roam the way they should. So part of it is about creating moose and elk and other highways for them. And we've introduced legislation. John Gerard introduced the legislation to make it happen. So along the Little Saskatchewan, the Red River, there are a number of other places you could do it. And you can still have development within it, but the key thing is making sure that you have a path, that you're making the most to make sure that there are places for wildlife to travel.
My last question, and this goes, and I realize there's still a decision on this, but I've been covering this for 3.5 years now and got to really know this issue fairly well. And I'd like to know what your party's stand is on the Silica Sands proposal and the Vivian Mine project. Lisa Naylor.
We respect the process of the Clean Environment Commission. In fact, many activists, I'm sure many people in this room, were fighting hard for that to happen. As the official opposition critic, I brought this forward multiple times. I wasn't the only one. I know de Guillemont did the same. I don't believe they would have called for a Clean Environment Commission report without that work that was done in the legislature. So we do respect that, and at this point, we would need to move forward according to recommendations through that process.
Dougal?
Yeah, we were very seriously concerned about it. I think we were the first party to bring this forward I think it was in August 2020, because we had concerns. Look, this is, and talking with the folks there, this is a pristine groundwater that cannot be cleaned up because it's underwater. If it gets tainted or polluted, there is no coming back from this. That water and the pollution will be there forever, all for a sand mine with technology that everyone knows has never been used before, and in the cost, I'll talk about it not even in terms of the environment, but the cost-benefit analysis. We cannot afford it. I don't think we can afford it. Ginny? So we're opposed to it.
Ginny?
Yes, I've been working in opposition, and we're grateful for the support that you've given us as we've been educating the people in the community. I've worked on this project since 2019. Because my drinking water is impacted. Our co-op farm drinking water could be impacted by this. So it's just an example of, if I appreciate that there was support for the Clean Environment Commission. It's ridiculous that one person on this panel can make the decision on whether or not to listen to the Clean Environment Commission report. So that shows how our system needs to change.
And to be fair to Minister Klein, there's a process in place here. And I know you inherited this issue, and you're kind of on the firing line here. And Oh, yeah, that's fine. You get that. Can you actually disclose whether you're for or against this? Because I'm not sure as minister you can.
I won't
but-
disclose whether I'm for or against it. I am not the one who makes the decision, despite what some who want to be in government think.
Tell us how that decision ultimately will be made, because it's gone to a consultative internal process. Is that ultimately a cabinet decision?
No. So what happens right now is that we've taken the information from the Clean Environment Commission. That information now gets passed on to the environmental branch within our Environment and Climate Department, the licensing division. We have technical experts, people that are seasoned in this industry. They're educated in this world. This is where they spend their day concerned about our environment, concerned about practices. They will ask questions to the CEC. They will ask questions to others that they feel weren't answered by the CEC. And that's why when that decision from the CEC first came out, I pushed hard to have the ability to release it that day. I didn't hold back. I put it out that day because I know it's an important issue. The reality is we're not trained or educated to make that decision.
Speak for yourself.
Experts. Are you a minor?
No, but I've assessed ecosystems and worked
Okay.
to maintain ecosystem health. So I recognize a shoddy presentation when I read
so
them.
you're not educated in what they're doing.
No, I've done this for 30 years, read
Okay.
technical reports.
So you have more education than the CEC? Thank you. That's all I want to know. In fairness, the CEC are the experts. And we have experts that work for the government of Manitoba, public servants that I believe have integrity and will make the right decision.
Okay.
And that decision will then be made public by the licensing division, at which point it can be appealed by the public.
Yeah, and that process still has months to go. I don't think we'll see anything any day now. It wouldn't be released during an election, would it? I can't imagine.
You know what? The department has the objective to meet
Sure.
all of the due diligence they have
Yeah.
to do. And I don't think it's fair to put politics into that because it makes like the department is not doing their job. They are doing their job.
So to be clear, it doesn't come to cabinet for approval or not?
The license gets decided by the licensing branch.
Okay.
If the government were doing their job, they wouldn't have approved the processing center first.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Wait.
if the government was doing their job, they would allow every license application to go through the process because that's what happens in the democratic society.
Yeah, and you know, I'm still fascinated why the mines branch wasn't initially consulted on the process. On
And
this
why
whole
we
thing.
weren't given funded, why the community groups weren't giving funding
Yeah.
for our technical experts. That
Yeah.
was within
So-
there. We needed that funding.
So I'm looking forward to the decision in that, and then probably, depending on how this goes, pending litigation and everything like that. So we'll see. Because the one thing that I think many of us know, what billable hours.
Never mind billable water. Water
Billable-
is life.
No,
Billable
billable hours, because I have the feeling that if it goes one way, it'll end up in a court process. I admire.
Yes, it will. Yes, it will.
I admire the passion, and if so many more issues facing us had this passion with it, boy, you know, we'd solve a lot more issues. So thank you all. I have about 90 seconds for each of you to kind of give your final act here, if you will. Thank you, by the way, for a very spirited conversation, and for the most part, you know, hey, not all of us will agree on stuff, and that's fine. So, Douglas Lamont, take 90 seconds.
Yeah, I just
Closing
wanna-
arguments.
I'll thank everybody. I'll try to keep this brief. In 2018, when I first ran for MLA, lead contamination in the soil of St. Boniface was a big deal. There'd been reports, and then the government denied it. When I found out that I'd won, I was an egotist. I wanted to see what the Free Press had said about me, and instead it was a story that the government said, oh, by the way, there is lead at 9 o'clock. They hadn't released it during the election blackout. And I sat there and I couldn't believe that they had sat on it. And then, so people were going after the PCs for this, and then the PCs retaliated by pointing out that the NDP had also sat on a lead report for years and years. And so this is the thing, is if these things need to be taken way more seriously than they are, we have to act. We also have a toxic site cleanup, but part of this is just recognizing the damage that's been done through industrial processes, and we've let people, I sometimes think in Manitoba, there's a sort of, people take advantage of our desperation and coming here and saying, we're gonna set up some big mine, and we say, okay, whatever you want, if you can bring us jobs, we'll do it. But then they leave a big mess behind. So we can't keep doing that anymore. We have to, not just for now, but into the future, we have to make sure that when we're doing any kind of development, we've got free, prior, and informed consent for everybody, because there's all sorts of people who, there are farmers out in Verdun who end up having oil derricks put on their land when they don't want it. So, right, so part of this is just being much more respectful and valuing what we have more. That's the thing. And sometimes saying that this is too precious to be exploited. That's the fundamental.
Lisa Naylor, take 90 seconds here.
I want to thank the organizers again for tonight and for each of you here in the audience and watching from home. I also want to thank Grandma Shingoose for getting us started in a good way tonight and for the engaging discussion we've all had. It is really important to hear a variety of voices and perspectives, and we need innovative solutions. We need to try different things and not get stuck in one way of doing things, and we really need to work together. I think that actually a lot of us here have a lot in common. We agree on a lot of things, most of us anyway. And there's one important thing that many of us agree on, which is that we do need to change the government. We can't afford another 4 years of moving backwards on GHG emissions, water protection, Indigenous consultation, or toxic chemicals. In this election, we do need to come together to defeat the PCs, and that's clear. That's why I am asking for your support to vote for Wab Kinew and the Manitoba NDP in this election. We can work together to make real progress with geothermal heating, electrification of vehicles, and public transportation. We will protect 30% of Manitoba land and water by 2030, and we will create more clean energy jobs for Manitobans. We'll plant more trees, and we will complete the North End water treatment plant. You don't have to choose between help for working people and a government that acts on climate change. The Manitoba NDP will do both. We will move forward on climate change and ensure that no one is left behind.
Minister Klein?
First of all, I want to thank all my colleagues. I know we have differences of opinion and ideas, but I think we, as Lisa alluded to, and so did Richard at the start, we are all committed to working diligently to protect our environment and make change. And we can't discount that. So thank you for that. Manitoba is a unique position. As I said earlier, our electrical grid is 97% green. 1 year of emissions is equivalent to less than 1 day of China's emissions. But we realize we still have work to do, and we are going to continue doing that work. We are committed to the North End treatment plant. I have been committed to it from my time on City Council. The NDP ignored the Clean Environment Commission and did not do the work to the North End treatment plant many years ago. Both of my colleagues on the board or on the chair here tonight have voted against many of the environmental initiatives and repeated many things that we are doing, that we are getting done. I have grandkids, maybe like you. I have kids, and they're going to have kids. I am committed to them and their future, and I will be committed and a force for the environment in government for 4 more years with the Progressive Conservatives.
Thank you so very much. Janine Gibson.
Well, thank you for saying that, Minister Klein. I find it odd that you why you refused to meet with me when I requested that we meet to talk about the CO silica thing. So I just want to say that now is the time for change. And I do also thank all the people who are here this evening and the people that organized this event and those of you who are at home, because there is hope. And if we work together, if you consider joining our green team, we can make the impacts that we know we need to make. Green is good for our communities, it's good for our environment, it can be good for our economy too, and deserves your support. So candidates are welcome. We've got a strong 15 started, but we need more. Now's the time to make a difference. Please serve, please donate, please let's make the difference that we need to make. Thank you.
And I thank you all. It's 8:30 on the dot, and we said we'd be finished by 8:30, so well done. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate that. This is always just kind of the snapshot. Pay attention to the campaigns. There's going to be, I'm working on a podcast on some of the promises here, and there's going to be some announcements, sites. You're all well read on this issue. I don't have to worry about this, but go ye forth and help people get motivated to participate in the campaign and the election. Adequate. There's tables outside. Say hello. The candidates are invited to be here for a few more minutes before they have to leave off. And thank you again, everybody. Thank you. Back to you, Cameron Armstrong.
Wow, what a night. Did everyone have a good time? Yeah, you folks had a good time? Awesome. Thank you so much, Richard, for being such an incredible moderator tonight, and thank you to all of our party representatives for joining us here today as well, too. I think that you've all certainly given us a lot to think about as folks are heading to the polls this October. And I personally am really excited to keep these discussions going up until the election and even after as well. Thank you again as well to Grandma Shingoose for starting our night off on such a beautiful note. And I would also like to give a big, big, big shout out to all of the volunteers who are here tonight and who have made this event possible. Yes. To all the folks who set up the logistics, to setting up the room, to the folks outside, and to the people live streaming tonight, thank you so, so much. And finally, I'd like to thank all of you for being here tonight. Thank you so much. Like I said before, it really warms my heart to see so many Manitobans out, gathered here in community and really passionate and paying attention to what's going on around us and making sure that our leaders know that climate is a priority for Manitobans. So we may be wrapping up the formal part of our evening, but I'd encourage folks to stick around for a little bit. There's some very cool tables outside run by some incredible folks and organizations. Yeah, feel free to hang out and talk to your neighbor for a little bit, but I will give you the heads up. We do only have the space until 9, so if you could head out by then, that would be fantastic. Yeah, thank you all so much for being here. Get home safe, and we hope to see you soon.